We're excited. There's some big stuff going on. And so, yeah, anything could happen here. It's going to be a fun ride.
Hello, and welcome to episode 66 of Great Things with Great Tech, the podcast highlighting companies doing great things with great technology. My name is Anthony Spiteri, and in this episode, we're diving into a world of bare metal as a service and automation with a company that's breaking boundaries in managing heterogeneous hardware. Spearheading the metal revolution, they're bringing the future of open hardware standards to the cloud. That company is Metify. I'm speaking to the co-founder and CEO, Mike Wagner. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks very much. It's a pleasure to be here, Anthony.
Excellent. So, Mike, just before we kick on and talk about all things bare metal, just want to remind the folks out there that if you love great things with great tech and would like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link on the show notes or head to GTwGT.com to register your interest. As a reminder, as always, all episodes of GTwGT are available on all good podcasting platforms: Google, Apple, Spotify, all the podcasting platforms out there, all hosted and distributed by Spotify Podcast. And finally, head to the YouTube channel at GTwGT Podcast, hit the like and subscribe button to follow to get all past episodes and future shows. And with that out of the way, Mike, let's talk about Metify, bare metal company doing great things in the space. It's kind of feels like it's the time for bare metal cloud. But before we dive into the founding of Metify and why you've co-founded it with your partner, maybe a bit of background into yourself and how you came to found Metify.
Yeah, sounds great. So, well, I started many years ago in tech on my own, just kind of dug it as a kid. And then in college, I started up with IBM as a college intern, and I was already into Novell networking at that point. And I did many inside careers at IBM. So, IBM is a wonderful place to just kind of explore and do all sorts of stuff in tech. I kind of worked in almost every division I think they have
Right.
over 15 years or so, 17 years, and then jumped over to Red Hat. I had some friends of mine that left IBM and went to Red Hat and convinced me to move over there, and that was a really wise move, and that exposed me to another whole segment of of business, specifically and importantly the channel side of the business, which we leveraged at IBM, but a lot of what we did was direct as well. I ended up when I was a district manager for Red Hat in the Pacific Southwest, we had a probably about an 80-20 split of direct versus channel business, roughly. Yeah, so but Red Hat really got me deeply involved in the channel. In fact, the last thing I did there was kick off this new group of SIs for North America called the Apex partner group. And that group was specifically focused on partners that could implement and provide value-added services around OpenShift, which is their container application platform of choice. So yeah, that's and then 3 years ago, 3.5 years ago, Ian and I, we were working on a bare metal provisioning solution. Ian Evans is my co-founder, and I met him because of the channel practice that we built, and the partner he was working at was actually one of our largest OpenShift partners, and also one of our largest partners overall, with a large services practice. So we were working on a solution. He had an idea for a solution years before he even joined that company, and we were able to flesh it out a little bit. And we recognized that in order to do this right, it required a startup. So that 3.5 years ago, we launched Metify, and here we are now.
So what drew you to leaving? Because obviously, 15 years at IBM, a fairly substantial chunk at Red Hat.
Yeah.
What made you go, yep, I'm going to go out and try and start something? Was it the idea was that compelling? Did you see
Yeah.
a white space that was in the market for it?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was always, so this concept of side gigging, right? I mean, I think for the entrepreneur, I think a lot of folks have an entrepreneurial spirit, and I certainly have one. And that's kind of one of the cool things about where we are now as a culture even,
Mm.
and the tools that are available to everybody, we can all kind of, go after things in different ways. And so for me, I always wanted to start my own company. I always envisioned myself as the CEO of my own company. And, there was a few close calls,
Yeah.
but it's an alignment thing, right? And
Mm.
obviously, with a family and kids, I wanted to make sure that I chose wisely before I dove into anything. And I had a couple of very, really close calls from a product and positioning perspective where I could have launched in other directions, had a couple offers to do something along those lines.
Yep.
But it just wasn't what I was looking for. And specifically, what I was looking for was something that was a niche software solution that really had a chance at disrupting something big. I didn't want to do it for a hobbyist business or a lifestyle business or whatever you want to call it,
Yeah.
where you can kind of, I wanted something that could actually, find something that disrupted things. And the cool part about working in this kind of advanced channels position where you're working with the best SIs around is that you really do get exposed to exactly what's happening at the application level, as well as with Red Hat, of course, all the way down to the OS and the difficulties
Yeah.
um, that are part of dealing with OSs and BIOSes and all those things that have to happen at the server level to make everything else work.
Just before we get into that, because I think that's obviously one of the problem statements that Metify is trying to solve, right? Is what you just talked
Mm,
about there, and the whole concept of how hard it is to actually provision a server, and then what the public cloud actually meant for that, and how there's been a bit of a pullback back to having some sort of server that you control at that bare metal end. But I just want to go back to the side hustle. You mentioned an interesting thing there. It definitely is the era of the side hustle, right? With the tooling that we have available, and I guess the thought of a lot of, especially the younger IT guys,
yeah,
around that their first sort of thought process is, I'll do my day job and see what I can do at night to get me to
right.
that side hustle. But you mentioned a good point there that you didn't want it just to be a hobby or some sort of if I could say, half-assed sort of attempt to do it. You really wanted to make sure that it was going to be something that had reason and could change the industry. And I think it's a very important sort of thing to consider when anyone's deciding to go into a side hustle.
Yeah.
It's got to be, yes, you can do a bit of a plaything, but don't expect it to be putting, like you said, food on the table for your family. That's got to be a consideration. So,
Yes.
what was so pressing about the problem statement then that gave you that spirit of conviction to be able to go and start it?
Oh yeah. So in many ways, so Ian Evans, my CTO and co-founder, he's a brilliant guy. And so when he came to me with this solution, and we started diving into it a bit, I could see his passion, first of all. And that's incredibly important. And I love hardware as well. So we were, sort of double geeking out on the potentials of this solution, right? And I mean, the first day I was just so blown away. I was like, oh my God, okay, this could be disruptively different because it brings so many needs into a single, very simple to use tool. And it's completely neglected. So when I think about the things that I noticed. So we have deep expertise in this area, right? I've been in the cold rooms and seen data centers and helped plan data centers of some of the largest companies around, as has Ian. Ian's done it very directly. I had services teams that were doing it
Yep.
at IBM. For Ian, he did it. I mean, he had to live it and build it. So he was the lead principal architect on a lot of these. Um, so that's critical, right? Having deep expertise in the area and feeling that degree of excitement because the area well enough to know, holy crap, everyone is going to get this. And then we had validation of it because we kind of built an alpha version, if you will. And that was in fact, a big part of what I was working with Ian on was like an alpha. What could we build? Because solution development, this was something I was always um, trying to push at Red Hat, was it's more than our product. What is the best solution? What are we doing with our partners to build something that customers actually use beyond the operating system or beyond Ansible or
Mm.
beyond any of our core products that our customers rely on. And that's where this idea of a bare metal provisioning solution leveraging Red Hat tools came into place, and we had a chance to alpha this with several of the top 100 customers in North America. We're talking Fortune 100 customers, the largest financial institutions, some of the largest Department of Defense groups, manufacturing organizations, aircraft builders, you name it. We got to show it to them, and they all literally were just like, okay, this is great. Where can we buy it?
Right.
We couldn't,
Okay.
there was no product, so we were stuck. And we're looking at each other like, oh my God, okay. And then a lot of the guidance that we got from those customers they know their pains, better than anybody, right? So a lot of the guidance that we got, we knew we had to do this as a startup. We could not show any, sort of any tie-in to any of the big players, HP, Dell, any of the big hardware players, any of the big software players. We just had to be this neutral Switzerland Mojo platform. We had to be this
Yeah, right.
Switzerland platform, if you will, that
I
could
think,
allow
yeah,
that low-level magic to happen.
I think that's the point where you realize that it has to be something that you go all in on, and you kind of risk, elements of your career on, and your
Yeah,
being and what you're doing. And if, the family, food on the table, we go back to that. I think
yeah, yeah,
a lot of people don't have the spirit of conviction to be able to make that jump. So the
yeah.
fact that you saw that and you were able to go in and go all in, it's quite credible. So let's talk about Metify. You've talked kind of a little bit around about what is Metify, like what is the product? What are you guys achieving?
Yeah. Well, it's an award-winning, low-level infrastructure and operations tool, really like an old school utility platform. I remember the days when you had utility programs, or we still do, but just don't use them as much. So we created and we wanted to make it incredibly simple to use, because currently infrastructure and operations kind of got left in the dust, frankly, because of the proprietary nature of servers and the protective importance of monetization of the software, that the big OEMs relied on and still
Absolutely, yeah.
do rely on. Very important for them to shift that into subscription stream revenue of some kind, right? Be it maintenance or software to manage those servers, right? It's a very big part of staying profitable. And we appreciate those guys, and believe me, the hardware platforms do have a lot of, there's a lot of gold in those OEMs with the things that they provide above and beyond white box servers, especially for less technically advanced organizations. But we were focused on simpleness and the discovery, provisioning, and really maintenance of any server platform, regardless of the manufacturer, regardless of where it was. We could remotely discover, provision, and enable that device, regardless of where it was, which we actually call them endpoints,
Yeah.
because it can be a server, it could be some type of edge device, it could be a sensor, it could be
Okay.
a palm top, whatever. And that's, with the dawn of the edge, if you will, and the growth of that, and all that's happening around the edge, it turns out, it's an incredibly important thing to be able to do.
Yeah,
especially, and I think the key to all this is it's in a lights out fashion. In other words, it's out of band. It doesn't matter. All we need is if there's power going to the device, right? It's got power, and there is some type of network connection that's, that we can establish through Ethernet or wireless, whatever. Then we can low level, update firmware, update BIOS, wipe out the hard drive, put in a new OS, load a new software stack, update the OS, whatever you can imagine from a low level maintenance perspective.
And this is all really because there's been a little bit of a move. Obviously, there's a big shift. There was a big shift to the public clouds, right? I talk about it often on this podcast, the panacea of what it was to say we're moving everything to the public cloud. On premises is dead. The cloud is where it is. And we've definitely seen this concept of repatriation, especially this year. It's been a big word this year. Like, it's happening a lot.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some very famous posts and articles out there about some big orgs that are pulling back from the public clouds and going back, to on premises and back to buying servers and boxes and whatnot. But you mentioned it earlier. There's a bit of a dead patch or a dead zone between what it was to provision a server, the operating system, and then virtualization came on and kind of almost superseded the hardware in terms of thinking about what we needed to do on the hardware. If you're new to computers and servers, or computers and serverless or whatever it might be today, you don't really understand what it is to have a physical box, right? So you don't
Yeah.
even know, let alone how to
Yeah.
upgrade a BIOS or a
Yeah.
firmware or anything, but it's still critical. It still happens. Like even if when you're in the public cloud, that all still happens, right? So
Yeah.
that hasn't gone away. But I think
Yeah.
when we've pulled back, so we're now pulling back to on premises. Bare metal has become obviously very popular. I've noticed that in the last 18 months to 24 months, the bare
Yeah.
metal clouds have become front and center. And in fact, quite a few traditional hosting providers that might have been doing virtualization infrastructure as a service have actually pivoted to offering bare metal as well. So, where
Yeah.
does Metify fit in that world?
Yeah, so that's the beauty of our platform, is that we have sort of private label services. So we work with hosters, right, to help them monetize bare metal and create their own bare metal clouds for their customers, as well as providing it directly to enterprises so they can DIY. And that all depends. That's a skill set thing, right? So we really, having a channel led business, it allows us to cover all those bases. Some of our partners have bare metal as a service offerings now as well, leveraging Mojo, as well as build services leveraging Mojo, because you can also just use it to build the servers and then ship them out to whoever,
Oh yeah,
to their customers. Yeah,
that's pretty cool.
absolutely.
So
Yeah, yeah.
Mojo is the platform,
Mhm.
and then Metify is a company name. So
Correct.
where did Metify come from? I'm always interested in the origins of company names.
Yeah. So Metify is a portmanteau, a combination of the words. So it's bare metal, metal, and simplified. And so metal simplified, Metify.
Beautiful.
There you go. Yeah,
So it's
Ian
not,
came up
yeah,
with it.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
It's not made up. It actually means something.
It means something. Yeah, absolutely. So, and that was important too, right? We just, we wanted people to know this thing is real, and
Yeah.
Metify made sense for us. So, yeah.
Yeah. And Mojo is the actual platform, or I guess you called it a tooling or tool set earlier.
Yeah. It's a platform. I mean, because there's a lot that goes into it, and there's a lot that we can do with it. So we have a service catalog that's also a part of it, dashboarding and monitoring of all of your endpoints. So yeah, it's truly a platform in that there's a number of components to it, and there is a lot. We kind of led everything from a security first posture, which is really required. In fact, we've got some work with the DoD right now that's specifically related to a new specification or new certification from a security perspective,
Okay.
kind of the secure platform specification, secure compute specification. So some really cool stuff coming. And yeah, all of this speaks directly to cloud repatriation, and the ability to handle these things on your own, but in a very secure way. The DMTF, which is the open standard that made all of this possible.
Mm-hmm.
The open standards group. The actual standard is called the Redfish specification.
Redfish, yeah.
Yeah. So Redfish made it all happen. Once all of the OEMs got on board, that's what enabled all of this to occur, and allow us to do our magic, and provide solutions both from a hosting perspective, right? So to tie this back into the question, having the ability to manage, to discover, provision, and manage, at low level from any manufacturer is incredibly powerful, and that gives you that bare metal solution, if you will.
Yep.
If you're a hoster, okay, cool. Now you have the tool set, you can use it, and we have special pricing for that. If you're a customer, you can just download it and install it into behind your firewall, and then you have your own sort of bare metal as a service solution, if you will. And now it's just bare metal has become the dominant architecture for containerized applications.
Yeah.
And there's a number of reasons why that's the case. But yeah, it's 52% now of containerized workloads are actually running on bare metal.
Wow.
So
Okay. Cool. And you,
yeah,
you would have had early, from a containerized point of view, working on OpenShift quite early in Red Hat career, right? When it was kind of there or thereabouts. I know that
mm,
OpenShift, to a certain extent, dominates a lot of the enterprise
yeah,
containerization space these days. It's just a great solution, very
yeah,
robust platform. So, okay, that's pretty cool. In terms of the open standard point of view, so I remember back, it's probably like it's got to be more 10 years ago. I remember the open compute platform was out there making waves. That was more about a data center and a rack and specific sizes of the compute and the racks and the servers, putting it in there, and then it was tied to hardware and software and whatnot. Is this an evolution of that in terms of Redfish and the MTF and the open standards? Because it's all about low level APIs, right? Is that an
yes,
evolution, or was that a separate path that
yeah.
didn't quite take off?
No, it's definitely they work together very well. They kind of evolve together. So I wouldn't say that one is taking over from the other because the open compute project specifies a number of things that Redfish does not care about, right? So the size of the rack and
Yeah,
different things along from a pure physical perspective. Now everything that's in that rack, of course, is interrogatable and usable, and OpenBMC also flows with the Open Compute project often, and that's another standards organization that we work with that has also gotten on board with the Redfish specification. So they coexist, and all of there's sort of backward compatibility or bilateral compatibility between the two of them. They work very closely together. So yeah, it's all coming together really beautifully, and we get to work across the board with all of them, including then there's others too. SNIA has Swordfish, which is the storage component. Um, there's a Yang to Redfish model for the networking stuff. There's just all of it is coming together, right? This desire uh, to be able to fix your own DIY and not be sort of proprietarily stuck with any one manufacturer has driven all this. And
yeah.
obviously the use cases demand it. So pretty
So
cool.
with in terms of the value and the benefit of the platform. So when
Mhm.
we talk about a complete life cycle, compute, storage, network, we've got the REST API there for control. We've got
Yeah.
low level BIOS updating and rollbacks. Is that kind of we talk about low level simplicity? Is that
Yes.
really the major benefit of this platform? It's that it takes away a lot of the pain points that traditionally have
Yeah.
come with managing a server.
Absolutely. And initially, I mean, that was the number one pain point describing. I mean, we talked to organizations that had to put off and had major outages and issues because they had to put off updating their servers because it was just so manually strenuous to be able to update all the BIOSes of
Yeah.
thousands of systems. We're talking the hand jam, as Kevin Backman called it, from Major League Baseball. So one of our really awesome customers, and there's no getting around the manual process that's involved in doing low level things like this unless you have a new tool. And yes, so that was one of the big things that drove it in the beginning. Um, and then it evolved from there because we also recognized this need for governance, security, maintenance, audits, right? What's the reporting associated with who's touched that server, right? So
Okay.
we
Yeah.
have a full chain of custody that's built in. And so the idea of server lifecycle management coupled with a secure, loggable, auditable platform, that's incredibly important. And it just, we couldn't find anything like it. And Ian, was always saying, God, I wish, I had this because it would make my life so much easier. And, just from an audit perspective, we talked to a few customers that it used to take them months and months to prepare for an audit. And now, with Mojo, you just spit out a report and you know exactly who's touched that server, exactly what BIOS levels are on it, any changes that have been made. Everything is kept up and reportable that touches Mojo that Mojo is managing. So
Yeah.
it's a huge value add
Yeah. That
beyond. Yeah.
I was going to say that
Go
hand jamming. I've never heard of it
ahead.
before.
Yeah.
sounds kind of like dangerously. It's a dangerous word.
Right. Yeah.
It's a bit edgy, but I
Yeah.
get it because I was one of those guys that for all my career would have to, manage a fleet of servers and think about, oh my goodness, here's another BIOS update. We've got to pump it out to 70, 80 servers now. That's not an easy task. Okay, let's roll through them.
Yeah.
And it was always a pain. And to that extent, because there was that pain associated with it, sometimes you'd put it off and put it off dangerously so, right? Because
Yeah.
I think this probably happens today, potentially less because we've got a lot more regulations and compliances and whatnot. But I know that my thought process was if it ain't broke, don't fix. And some of these servers, we wouldn't upgrade the firmware or BIOS up them
That's
because
right.
it's too hard. So,
Yeah.
with this platform now making that easy across the board, you don't
Yeah.
have those problems. And then what happens is those problems will basically build on top of themselves as well. Because if you've got an old
Mm,
firmware, then you're going to have a new OS that goes on it. The OS has compatibility issues.
that's right.
You're always playing catch up at that point. So I feel like this potentially solves a lot of those roadblocks a lot of practitioners had back in the day.
Yeah, yeah, you're describing sort of the cascading failure issues that come with putting off um, low-level updates, and yeah, and then it becomes difficult to know what you have in the field. So we have one of the big use cases that we are finding ourselves working with large customers and mid-size as well on is we're getting placed in their labs. So all the testing of the architectural footprints that are in the field, they get to make sure that everything is up to date and everything works perfectly before it gets shipped. And then and shipped, I mean, downloaded and updated and everything working, right? Now that could include a hardware upgrade as well, but for the most part, it's software. So we get to update all those things, and inside the labs, they get to test across all of the platforms. Usually, and it can vary, but then the important thing is what's in the field. Okay, so having that remote ability to do a low-level discovery of all of the BIOS levels, all of the firmware levels. So you essentially have a gold image, if you will, of what it's supposed to be, and then you run a report against that within Mojo, and then you look at, okay, here, these are the boxes. Oh, we got one in Cleveland that needs to be, that's on the old BIOS, so we know it will break if we try and roll this upgrade out.
Yeah.
Or similarly across the board, you can do this with thousands of servers, and that's incredibly valuable. So especially with the growth of Edge and everything that's happening out there, keeping track of what's actually in those servers, what's in those small edge devices is just critical.
Yeah, I was going to say how the sphere of what is compute today has changed massively. It's
Yeah.
changing quickly. So what defines the edge for you? Because I know that the MLB case study from one of the customers you mentioned, Major League Baseball,
Yeah.
they moved away from VMware and they've got their stadiums and they had certain compute platforms in there and they've
Hmm.
shifted away to a containerized based platform. And
Yeah.
you guys are managing that low level aspect of that. So how just talk a little bit about that, and effectively what's happening out there, and using MLB as a pretty good example of what's going on.
Yeah. Yes. So thanks for bringing that up. Major League Baseball is a perfect use case that is a true hybrid edge cloud solution, as well as a tie back to their data center also. So they've got sort of you can almost view it as a hub spoken cloud perspective as an architecture. And yeah, Kevin had this hilarious thing I'd never heard before called the hand jam, where they'd have to fly around to the stadiums, and their edge pops, their edge points of presence were 5 servers inside of each ballpark, and depending on the ballpark, it was either slightly better or worse class citizen. Sometimes it was a closet, sometimes they had a nice room.
Yeah, I can
It just
imagine it.
depends.
Yeah,
Yes, you know exactly. Yeah, because each of the other part that's interesting, right? All of the ballparks are owned by by the individual owners. So you're kind of managing an independent fleet, if you will.
that's amazing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's a harder deal than like retail, and I'm surprised we still we're in some early beta with a few retailers, but we haven't done a major retail rollout yet, which is I'm shocked by because the use case is perfect for us. But
I was going to say,
uh,
I can think of a customer that is one of our customers that I work for that this would be perfect for. It lends itself
yeah,
exactly to what you're talking about. Maybe we should
yeah.
talk afterwards, but I'll take that
That sounds
offline.
great. Well, speaking of, it's funny because this is why we actually took in the funding because we have to get our name. People need to become more aware of what's going on, even though, we've had Major League Baseball and some other really big customers. There is certainly a competitive advantage aspect, so we can't talk about some of our customers. And MLB was kind enough to promote, and publish, and they actually have a tech blog where they published us and
Yeah.
put a graphic up with where
Hey,
we
just
sit in
quickly
this.
on that. So the seeding, so 1.5 million a couple of months ago. So
Yeah,
that's obviously pretty big, and you're looking to kind of work on that. Obviously, you've just talked about maybe a bit of marketing, bit of realization of the market, but also trying to improve the experience. But that
yeah,
lends itself to the fact that for the best part of 4 years, you were bootstrapped, right? Which is pretty impressive.
yeah, yeah. 3 years of bootstrapping. So, and that's another reason why I had to be really sure that this could disruptively
Yeah.
change things. I had saved up a few money, saved up a few pennies, and actually, crypto, because we're also working with some players in crypto,
Okay.
and that made it possible for this, right? I was an Ethereum miner. I made, had a couple of rigs and made a few dollars extra along with my, saving up cash over my professional career. And,
That's
so
awesome.
that,
So
yeah,
you, so
yeah,
you're, I missed out on the early days of Ethereum mining, even though my old boss he said Ethereum. I didn't listen to him and I
yeah,
missed out. But anyway,
yeah,
so you're able to kind of leverage a bit of crypto
yeah.
foresight and use that to basically bootstrap. That's awesome.
Yes, it definitely helped. It wasn't the sole contributor, but yeah, it was a nice, it made me feel like, okay, I've got enough here that I know I can give this a good run. And
Awesome.
yeah, the goal was too, I didn't want to give it away because we really were confident that we had a solution here that would immediately, provide value for our customers.
So just go
So
back to
yes,
yeah. So just go back to the MLB use case and the quick
yeah,
transition from VMware to what you guys are doing and what they're doing now in a
yeah.
nutshell.
So in a nutshell, yeah, that was kind of the problem statement for MLB was they were it felt they were paying too much for their virtualized environments. And it also wasn't the architecture of choice. So money wasn't the sole reason, but it certainly was. I mean, this move towards containerization creates a much cleaner platform to deliver your applications on when you can do it with bare metal. And you get better application performance. You get lower latency. You get better uptimes. There's a number of positive benefits that outflow from getting your architecture right. So this virtualization not only was expensive, but it also negatively impacted their application performance and overall uptime. So what do you do to now granted, there's an ease of function benefit,
Yeah.
but when you're technically proficient and capable, and in this case, well, with Mojo platform, it makes it incredibly easy to do all the things you need to do, and still save a bunch of money in the process. So you get it's a win-win in every way. So yeah, the problem statement for them was, okay, let's try and be able to have a centralized point to manage and provision, discover, manage, provision all of our edge pops, all of our edge points of presence, while partnering with Google to be able to upload all the data into GCP, into Google
Okay.
Cloud Platform, running the applications on Google Anthos, which is a competitor to OpenShift and another one of the enterprise application platforms that sits on top of that is Kubernetes based. So yeah, that was the main problem statement, right? They had to get on bare metal. They wanted a way to ongoing in an ongoing manner manage and provision without flying out and doing the infamous Kevin Backman's
Got
word
it.
there, the
Yeah.
hand jam.
Yeah. I'm doing it
Uh,
now. Yeah.
that's right. So it's funny, when I was when I was a Novell engineer with IBM, we called it sneaker net.
That's it.
I don't know if you
That's what I knew. Yeah. That's what I
Yeah,
knew it as.
sneaker
Yeah.
net was the only term. So it was hilarious. I mean, he's South African. He's got some of the funniest sayings you've ever heard. It's
That probably actually makes sense now in terms of,
yeah,
yes, it
yeah,
makes sense in terms of where it came from. Okay.
it's absolutely awesome. So yeah, so yeah, it covered all the bases for him, and we were able to implement it very quickly. And in a few weeks, we kind of had it done. In fact, it was as soon as they saw Mojo, and this has been a very repeatable experience, they just were like, okay, does it does it really work this easily? And I'm like,
Right.
yeah. And I'll never forget the VP said, okay, so their VP of IT, who's Kevin's boss, Felipe Negron, said to me, is there anything it can't do? Kind of jokingly, but kind of serious. I'm like, there's a number of things on our roadmap that we really look forward to getting in, but yeah, it can do all this stuff. And so it was like I said, they actually said, let's skip the POC, let's put it straight into production. And we
Oh,
were
cool.
landed and operating within a few weeks, and had their ballparks up and going. So, and now we're in there. We've grown every year with them. And they've been a customer for, I think they're in their third year. So
Right.
um, now we're in their minor league parks as well. And, that continues to grow. They've got a lot of different minor league teams. So makes their lives much easier across the board now, not just in the major league ballparks, but also across
Yeah,
the other
it's
stadiums.
full automation, isn't it? So it's like
Mhm.
it's the automation of something that is fundamentally a manual task. The walk up, the
Yes.
sneakering, the hand jamming, all that kind of stuff. So that's pretty cool. Quickly talk
Yeah.
about the RESTful API and infrastructure as code. I know that you plug into you're 100% REST focused. Obviously, that's very important. The
Yeah.
tooling out there, I assume, plugs into every infrastructure as code out there that's possible, that's popular. So to that end, anyone who would be using any type of Terraform, Ansible, whatever, Chef, whatever it might be, they can
Yeah.
plug into your system and basically do this thing.
Yes. So, and that was a big value point and something that Ian was really excited about. He said, okay, we're not going to use any of these garbage old methods right now. We want this to be modern and a modern tool that treats infrastructure and operations as a first-class citizen, and really brings a disruptive level of simplicity to these tasks that infrastructure has to deal with. So yeah, the restful nature of all of that and the API for everything way that we built Mojo platform really enables that degree of simplicity as well as security, and allows you to do things that just weren't possible 5 years ago.
Yeah,
I
it,
mean,
it
it just
allows everyone to consume it as a cloud, and that's kind of the
yeah,
important thing. And we
that's right.
moved to cloud, and I think the end result of cloud is that people wanted to consume as cloud, but not necessarily have to deal with the public cloud. So that lends itself to the
Yeah,
service quite well. Hey, just finish off with
yeah.
where are you guys going? Like where are you going to continue to innovate and disrupt the market moving forward?
Yeah. So in the short term here, the big thing is we're going to be downloadable. So that's one of the things that we've been getting a lot of requests for. Um, because as it is right now, you go to our website and it's you can click for a demo, but you can't just download the product and kick tires on it and play with it, right? So the downloadability is something that we should have online in a couple weeks, 2 weeks or so.
Excellent.
So we're really excited about that, and that's another reason Titletown Tech and our VC investment is helping us get there, because it's a significant lift for us from a development perspective. So that's happening. We're also developing more on the network front, which is really fun, and on the wireless broadband front. So we have another product called Photon, and that's a broadband wireless solution that is best in class. It's just a really cool solution that we helped teachers out when COVID hit a couple years
Ah,
ago.
excellent.
Ian helped out the local community and got these teachers online so they could teach their classes.
Awesome.
And the tech that resulted in that was really cool.
All right. Well, Mike, that was a great conversation. I think what you guys are doing is amazing. Metify is definitely, riding this awesome wave that we have at the moment with bare metal, but you're doing it in quite a unique way, and you've obviously had some great success. So, thanks for being on the show. And just as a reminder, if you love great things with great tech, we'd like to feature in future episodes, you can click on the link on the show notes or head to GTwGT podcast or GTwGT.com or go and find me at Anthony Spiteri or at GTwGT podcast on Twitter. And with that, thanks to Mike and thanks to Metify for being on episode 66 of Great Things with Great Tech.
Pleasure being here, Anthony. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot, mate.
All right, man. You got it. Have a good one.